We're not going to overreact or make any final conclusions after 4 games. But when you look at the Chicago Bears roster so far, the players who have been struggling the most have been the new guys brought in by Ryan Poles. And some of the players that have shown the most progress and growth are holdovers from Ryan Pace.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears your first listen today. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the right candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. On the show today, we take stock of this Bears roster, particularly the newcomers brought in from Ryan Poles, both free agents and the NFL draft, to kind of get a sense of where the Bears are getting the contributions they were looking for and where they're not, and to see what kind of trends we can take away from it, and really what we need to be watching for then as we go through the rest of this upcoming season. And we'll kind of compare that to some of the holdover players, and also maybe quickly the players that the Bears didn't bring back that have gone on to other teams, and spoiler alert, aren't doing great on other teams either. But I was struck watching the Giants game too, across the board. Like, you start to look at who's struggling right now on this Chicago Bears roster. And for me, it tends to be more so the new players that happen to all be brought in by general manager Ryan Poles, and less so the holdovers remaining from Ryan Pace. And I think there is a sort of an obviousness to some of that. There is a bias there that, of course, Ryan Poles is going to hold on to the best players from the previous regime while adding his own players. And to me, the message of this whole discussion is not Ryan Poles is bad, Ryan Pace was good, and we need to, that the Bears made the wrong decision at general manager. That's not exactly the takeaway I want to have here. The takeaway I want to have here is that, this team building exercise from Ryan Poles this offseason was a lot of like taking a chance on guys to see who could be fits long-term, maybe where they could find some value. And so far, some of the value plays that Ryan Poles have gone after haven't quite panned out to the level that maybe we were optimistic they could, and some have been a little bit more of a disappointment. But again, only 4 games and a lot more time for things to change. Also, all players working in a new system and on getting used to new teammates. There are plenty of reasons why some of the free agents might struggle a little bit more. But I also want to point out the free agents and the draft picks that have done well too, right? It's not a universal all good or all bad type of situation. Like, you run through the free agents, the prominent free agents, right? We're not going to go through the backup tight ends or, the backup offensive linemen that haven't played, right? But the free agents that are actually playing meaningful snaps that we can evaluate. I think Equanimeous St. Brown, well, he hasn't been great. I mean, we have to understand that the bar here is that the Bears as a whole have not been great. No one has been playing like dominant football on this team, but compared to like expectations, Equanimeous St. Brown came in as a guy who was like a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 in Green Bay, who got cut last season. And all things considered, he's been the Bears' number 2. He hasn't been great by any means, and maybe not an NFL league-wide caliber number 2, but I think he's at least slightly exceeded my expectations. I was expecting less from Equanimeous St. Brown, and I'll give Ryan Poles, like, not that EQ is like, long-term number 2 wide receiver in Chicago or anything, but like, there's a little something there. They've gotten more out of him, it seems, so far than what Green Bay was able to get out of him. So I'll give Poles some credit there. But then, like, for example, Byron Pringle barely played and then got hurt again, and he's been a total non-factor. And maybe that's not specifically Ryan Poles' fault, but when you look at some of the ways that the team is struggling, right? Part of the reason you're struggling is because the wide receiver you spent the most money on has not been available to you, and I think that's part of the equation. It was not himself, it was not full strength when he was on the field, and now he's just not on the field, and that's part of the problem of the deficiency at the wide receiving core, because Pringle was supposed to be wide receiver too, and that's been EQ, and EQ's been all right, but Pringle was supposed to be something a step better than that, and we haven't gotten to see it. So it's not like Ryan Poles, it's not purely a Ryan Poles miss because injuries aren't the GM's fault, but it is something that is missing at this stage and still has time to turn around a bit there. Or you look across the rest of the offense, Lucas Patrick on the offensive line. At this point, especially after what we saw against the Giants, feels like kind of a negative there, right? I mean, just played pretty awful at left guard and has been inferior to Tevin Jenkins at right guard as well. Supposed to be your center, though, so still time for him to take over at center once the hand fully heals, maybe improves as the hand gets more healthy, and maybe the center position is easier for him for some reason. We'll see, but for now, he's definitely been more of a minus rather than a plus in terms of free agent additions. And real quick on offense, we got to throw in the fullback, Kari Blasingame. Definitely been a plus, great lead blocker for them. And I keep telling you, there's going to be a big plastic play to Blasingame at some point soon. It's coming, and you heard it here first. The Bears are working him in the passing game a little bit more downfield, and it's going to happen. They're going to have a splash play to Blasingame. Just wait for it. You heard it here first. But like defensively, the guys who have been struggling the most, Al-Quadin Muhammad, a defensive end, been rough in run defense, hasn't gotten much going as a pass rusher. It kind of was brought in to be that veteran that has familiarity with Matt Eberflus, right? There's not supposed to be a learning curve with him. That excuse wasn't supposed to be there, and he just hasn't been very good. And at linebacker, Nick Morrow, a lot of missed tackles, a lot of poor fits in the running game. He's athletic and fast, but he just hasn't been very good. And there's still time for him to settle in a little bit more. And none of these guys are like referendums on these are all busts or these are all excellent value free agents. It's just kind of, it's a little bit murky for those guys. I'm a little torn on where to evaluate Justin Jones at the defensive tackle spot. You know, the consolation prize to Larry Ogunjobi. I think he's had flashes of some nice plays, but then some other plays where he gets washed in the running game a little bit. And overall, he hasn't been quite as productive in the pass rush as the Bears need him to be. So I'm somewhere in the middle on him at this point. Probably wanted more from him, but he also was never that guy before. And I think he sort of continued on the same track of the guy he was, where expectations were higher in Chicago, but he hasn't been like appreciably worse than he was before in his career, but hasn't taken that next step forward. And I think you're feeling that lack of interior pass rush at times from this Bears defensive line. So like across the board, there's not like overwhelming positives of like, hey, here's the free agent that Ryan Poles signed that is just dominating. EQ, I think, has been the most positive. Maybe Dante Pettis has exceeded expectations as well, but you're not seeing that like that guy they signed on a one-year deal that is just really giving the Bears a bunch of bang for their buck. And you've got guys that they were going to rely on in key starting roles like Lucas Patrick, Al-Quadin Muhammad, Nick Morrow, and to some extent Byron Pringle that have been worse than expected, or Pringle not available, have not provided what we expected from them this season. And that's an important part of this equation of why this Bears roster is struggling. Part of it is a number of the free agents that they brought in have not played as well as the Bears have needed them to up to this point. I think discussion is a little bit different when it comes to Ryan Poles' draft picks, given that they're rookies, but some of those rookies have been put in really big situations where they still need them to play better. We'll kind of go through that rookie class and then look at some of the former Bears that the team moved on from as well next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. As you gear up for fall, you're going to need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. And LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. I'm on LinkedIn. I bet you're also on LinkedIn too, or if you're not, you know plenty of people that are. They've got simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. It's definitely too early to raise major red flags about the long-term production of this Bears draft class. Usually it takes 3 years to really fully evaluate young players and whether or not they can be as good as they can be. And so I want to make clear that, like, on this podcast and on other episodes, like when we're critical of Kyler Gordon, for example, there's not really much sugarcoating. He's been bad, right? That doesn't mean he can't still be good, and it doesn't mean that it's any sort of referendum on what he's going to be as an NFL player. We've seen plenty of players come into their rookie season and struggle a little bit and need more time to adjust and eventually turn things around and play really well. I think we've been spoiled at times. Not to make this a credit for Ryan Pace thing, but like he did have some draft picks come in and play well. It was never usually the early round draft picks. The first and second round track record, not great. But we've seen, fourth and fifth round picks in the previous regime make even really immediate impacts. And we sort of came to almost expect that a little bit. And so things are going to be different under Ryan Poles. You can't always expect that to happen. They certainly have had a fifth round pick like Braxton Jones step into the starting lineup and have continued some of that trend. But like if we start with Kyler Gordon, right? I'm trying to be delicate about it because I see it two ways. One, he's a rookie. You can't expect a rookie cornerback to come in and just be a shutdown guy, right? I mean, there's always going to be rookie mistakes, and teams are going to attack him in different ways and test him in different ways. And so we need to make sure that our expectations are appropriate here. But I think in the same conversation, right, kind of like we talked about with the free agents, the Bears exited the draft. I went into the draft and exited the draft with a certain expectation that Kyler Gordon was going to be a starter and Jaquan Brisker was going to be a starter. They were going into this season essentially forced to rely on them as starting caliber NFL players. And you could understand that there are going to be rookie bumps along the way, but I think what we've seen from Jaquan Brisker is some good play and those flashes as a rookie, and then also some rookie bumps along the way. Jaquan Brisker's progression so far has been, I think, that normal amount of like, yeah, he's a rookie and you're relying him on a starter. And, he had a nice sack. He's had some big hits. He's made a few plays here and there. And he's also made too many missed tackles. And he's also been out of position in run defense. And he's also been too over-aggressive on play action. Like, he's doing the kind of things that are like little rookie mistakes that do hurt him. But overall, like, he looks like he belongs as, maybe if it's a low-end starter right now in the NFL, he still kind of looks the part of a starting caliber NFL safety that's, on the right process to getting better and growing in that role. Kyler Gordon is somewhere below that, somewhere behind that. Right? We haven't seen a ton of like the positives to make up for it. Was it against the Packers? I think he had a nice pass breakup in the end zone and later had a nice pass breakup on a slant route. Like, there have been a couple of those plays, but there have been so many more of those. He looks lost. He looks overmatched. He looks not ready type of plays that are concerning. And for me, the context I want to have it in here is not that it's concerning about his long-term prognosis. It's concerning because the Bears are relying on him as a starter and need starting caliber play from him and have not gotten it. In the same way that we talk about Lucas Patrick, Al-Quadin Muhammad, or Nicholas Morrow. It's about what the expectations were, that even as a rookie, we thought Kyler Gordon could come in and at least hold it down a little bit. Make some mistakes, sure, but hold things down. And it's really been, I think, the weak link of this Bears secondary. When you compare it to a guy like Kindle Vildor, who is one of these Ryan Pace holdovers that we mentioned earlier, and it's like, he's been a pleasant surprise. Not playing, lights out, dominant cornerback play by any means, but we went into this season thinking Kindle Vildor is going to be your big weakness, and you'll be fine with Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon. And instead, Jalen Johnson's hurt now, and Kyler Gordon has been the big weakness. That even Jalen Jones, the undrafted rookie free agent on the outside, hasn't seemed as vulnerable as Kyler Gordon. And it shouldn't be that your rookie undrafted free agent looks less vulnerable than your rookie second-round pick, albeit the undrafted free agent has not been on the field nearly as much as Kyler Gordon, and it's a much smaller sample size, and I think over the course of the season, that will likely equal out. So again, I'm not trying to raise all the red flags in the world on Kyler Gordon, but he's not giving the Bears as much as we even expected for a second-round rookie in his first season. And that has been, again, part of this problem of relying on these Ryan Poles acquisitions to be better through these first 4 games, and they're going to need him to be better. Brisker, I think there's been some ups and some downs, but we can feel kind of okay about where things are going in that direction. Velus Jones has been hurt. Kind of the same thing. It's like Pringle. They needed him out there. I'm not going to hold the one muffed punt as like some evidence that things are going very poorly for him. Way too small of a sample size. Jury's still out on how much Velus Jones is going to contribute right away here. Braxton Jones certainly exceeded expectations by winning the starting job at left tackle. Now in the season, I think he's looking like a 5th round left tackle. Like he hasn't been a disaster, right? He has not been. We remember disaster left tackles in the 2010s of Chicago Bears history, right? I mean, we're not talking a Jamarcus Webb, Frank Omiel type left tackle where it's just like, on every play, he's the weak link and everyone's attacking him. Like, I don't want to make this an offensive line breakdown kind of thing, but like when you start to go through biggest problems on this Bears offensive line, I think before the Cody Whitehair injury, center was number 1, and now I think Lucas Patrick at left guard is probably number 2, and then I go Jones is your 3rd worst, and then Borum, and then Jenkins has been your best. Borum's been your 2nd best, and probably then Braxton Jones probably your 3rd. Like all things considered, he's getting the job done. Hasn't been great. There have been mistakes. It's kind of like Brisker, where it's like, yeah, there are going to be mistakes. He's a rookie, probably going to be overmatched sometimes, and he's going to have to learn along the way. But has not been any sort of a disaster, and has been okay with some good and some bad in that process. So I think that's still for now a win, or barely a win for Ryan Poles there. Dominic Robinson has flashed as a 5th round defensive end. I think he's exceeded expectations, not drastically, but enough. That first game, wow. And, still getting some playing time in there. And then the punter, Trenton Gill, got to give him some credit for that. He's been punting very particularly well for a 7th round rookie, just kind of thrown into the mix there, replacing a veteran punter who left. Well, we'll talk about that veteran punter who left and some of the other players that Ryan Poles let go or didn't re-sign, right? If we're saying, okay, some of these Ryan Poles additions haven't been phenomenal, but what about the players they replaced, right? Can we look back and say, oh, Ryan Poles shouldn't have signed X, he should have just kept this player? We'll go through a check-in briefly on some of the players the Bears let go and see how they're doing on their new teams and whether the Bears should have kept them or made the right decision to let them go. Next on Locked On Bears. Locked On Bears podcast is sponsored by our friends at BetOnline, the number 1 source for all of your sports betting needs each and every week. I put my money down on Bears Giants last week with our friends at BetOnline. It's the number 1 place we trust and recommend. Right now, the Bears are 7-point underdogs on the road at Minnesota this week. The over-under set at 44 points, and the money line would be Bears plus 270 if you think they can pull off the upset. BetOnline is going to be your source for all the latest developments for each game, the team matchups, the news, the in-depth articles, and the analysis you need, not only for Bears-Vikings, but any game in any sport. Major League Baseball playoffs right around the corner, all the different combat sports, soccer, tennis, boxing, MMA. I mean, I know soccer and tennis aren't combat sports, but the combat sports plus soccer plus tennis plus anything you can name it, plus live in-game betting as well. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events. Head on over to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. The reason I want to circle back to some of the players that left the Chicago Bears this offseason is because, right, we were talking, I like this theme of like some of the Ryan Poles holdovers have been particularly effective this season, have played better than expected, right? Kindle Vildor has played better than expected. Tevin Jenkins has played better than expected. Larry Borum is making progress, we'll say. But, it's like Herbert's playing really well. Montgomery's playing really well. Some of these guys have taken some of those steps forward. Some have not. Like Mooney hasn't had quite the production. Robert Quinn hasn't been as great. But Eddie Jackson bounces back, right? Some of these players are making some of that progress. Sam Mustipher is not. And so it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. Is Ryan Poles right about these guys? But you look at the players that Ryan Poles didn't keep, and the Bears aren't missing too much. This was sparked for me because I saw a stat on Allen Robinson that just made me maybe kind of sad, disappointed, kind of confused, because I really liked Allen Robinson as a player, as a person. I really thought he was underrated and got too much of the blame, but his struggles have continued in Los Angeles. Through the first 4 weeks of the season, Allen Robinson has fewer catches and yards this year than he did last year in the Bears offense. It's just rough, and I don't know why he's lost a step. I don't know what exactly is going on, but PFF has charted Allen Robinson with a 20% route success rate against single man coverage this season. Like, he's only getting open on 20% of his routes against one-on-one man coverage. The league-wide average is 30% for all receivers. So he's like well below average and even just getting open in one-on-one coverage. And he's a good, like, we've seen him be a 1,400-yard receiver. He's been a multi-year 1,000-yard receiver before in his career. Like, he's looked like an NFL number one receiver in his career. And it just, I don't know what happened. I don't have an answer. You know, he got another contract, right? People were blaming, is he mailing it in because he didn't want to be in Chicago and wanted his new contract and blah, blah, blah. He got the contract. So, like, why now? Is it just convenient to say, oh, well, he got the contract, so now he's not trying hard anymore? Because if you don't try hard before or after the contract, it's hard to keep getting big contracts. So I just don't buy in that it's all financially motivated or anything like that. But it illustrates that, hey, like, the Bears are struggling at wide receiver this season. But if they had re-signed Allen Robinson, I don't know how much better they would be doing, considering even on a team like the Rams with Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford, like, Robinson is still not getting open, and it's tough and it's disappointing to see. Or on the offensive line, right? We know the Bears O-line has struggled. We know the left guard spot now is going to be a problem. What about the Bears left guard from last season, James Daniels? You know, they let him go and let him sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. From what I've seen in Pittsburgh, largely the same guy. He's been good, not great. Would he be an upgrade over what the Bears have? Absolutely. No doubt. He'd be a better left guard than Lucas Patrick right now. And maybe, I don't know if he'd be a better right guard than Tevin Jenkins right now, but you know, he's been the same guy, and that would be an upgrade, but it's not like he left and was like worlds better. He's just been the same guy and cost a bit more money than the Bears spent on the offensive line. I don't know how well they could have afforded him, but you know, so I'm not ready to say like, oh, they messed up letting James Daniels go, because it kind of went exactly how you would expect. We knew what James Daniels was. We knew what he wasn't. He's been the same player in Pittsburgh. All right. You know, I want a better Bears offensive line. Is the Bears offensive line bad specifically because they didn't re-sign James Daniels? Not exactly. What about Bilal Nichols, the defensive line, right? Bears pass rush hasn't been as much as we want on the interior there. But you look at how he's doing in Las Vegas, some occasional flashes. He's had a couple of pressures. I think he's got a sack in there this season. But, you know, disappears at times and isn't giving you a ton of consistency overall. Sounds a lot like the guy that we saw in Chicago in his last season, right? Flash as a rookie, of course, and had some nice plays, but kind of declined more and more. And the Bears kind of said, not really looking like a big-time difference maker for us, so we'll let you go. And kind of the same guy there in Las Vegas. I don't think the Bears are necessarily missing out too much on not re-signing Bilal Nichols. Akeem Hicks in Tampa now. Still got a big contract that I don't think the Bears would want to pay. He's also hurt. He's injured. He played like 1.5 games and injured in the second week, I believe, of the season. So he's out, and that kind of follows with what he had done in Chicago. So if you had Hicks right now, you'd maybe hurt as well, and you're not gaining anything there, and you're kind of back to where you were with him before. I will say the one free agent that left Chicago that's doing really, really well, Pat O'Donnell, the punter. He was a special teams player of the week for the Packers a couple weeks ago, and has been a pretty solid, steady punting effort for them. Not missing him because Trenton Gill has been pretty solid for a rookie punter. So overall, not worried too much about that one, but credit where credit's due. Pat O'Donnell still punting well. Then there's Khalil Mack, who the Bears traded away. Did not choose to it wasn't a chose to resign. It was a trade and get a second round pick to add to your team that way. And we knew in that trade, right, that the Bears were giving up a really good player. They knew he was good. It wasn't a question of whether Khalil Mack was good or not. It was whether his, $24 or $27 million salary or whatever it was, whether that was what's best for the Chicago Bears this year and beyond. Khalil Mack is still playing well in Los Angeles, doing a lot of Khalil Mack things. Maybe not like defensive player of the year Khalil Mack, but still very, very, very good Khalil Mack. To me, that doesn't mean, Ryan Poles made the big mistake by trading him, because I think, in the long term, having a rookie second-round pick there is probably doing the Bears more good than having Khalil Mack this season. And if Brisker pans out, absolutely, that will end up being more of it. So I don't see the Mack thing as like, Ryan Poles sure botched that one because he let a good player go, because we knew he was letting a good player go, and that was part of the equation at the time. So there's not really a hindsight thing there. The other thing to consider is that, he released Danny Trevathan. still a free agent, health concerns there. Released Tariq Cohen, still a free agent, health concerns there. And they let Eddie Goldman walk, and he ended up retiring. So, like, those guys haven't been available and haven't been helping other teams. They haven't gone on and done anything greater. So I think the bigger point being, like, yes, Ryan Poles turned over a bunch of these key players from the Ryan Pace roster, but the ones he let go have all been either pretty much what they were in Chicago or worse on their new team. So it's not like the Bears, it's not like Ryan Poles miscalculated and said, oh man, I accidentally let go of these really good Ryan Pace players. Oh no, what am I to do? I replaced them with these duds. No, they let go of guys that, again, not playing well or are about the same as they were last season in Chicago when the team wasn't good enough. So from like a process standpoint, all of them felt fairly needed to be replaced. And some of those replacements have done well. Feels like maybe more of them have not done as well, but it's still only week 4, entering week 5. A lot of season left for these guys to get more comfortable around each other. A lot of season left for these guys to get more comfortable in the playbook, to get more comfortable in Chicago and maybe settle in a little bit more, think a little less, and react and play fast and loose a little bit more and improve as the season goes on. It's good that guys like Blasingame and Equanimous St. Brown and some of those guys, Dominic Robinson, have picked things up fairly quickly. There's still time for the likes of Lucas Patrick to improve, for Al-Quadin Muhammad, for Nick Morrow to settle in a little bit more, for Velus Jones to become a higher impact player and actually get some offensive snaps, and for Kyler Gordon to learn on the fly and turn some things around as this season goes on. So we'll be keeping close tabs on all of the new Ryan Poles additions all throughout the year here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or whether you're watching on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that little bell that notifies you whenever we post a new podcast episode. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today, and hopefully every single day. If you're looking for your second listen, check out all the different Locked On Podcast Network sports podcasts we have for all of your favorite teams. We are your team every day. That includes Locked On Bulls, Locked On Cubs, Locked On White Sox, Locked On Blackhawks, Locked On Northwestern Wildcats, Locked On Illinois Fighting Illini, and so much more. So check out whether you're a Chicago sports fan of these other teams or you got teams in other markets because you're a transplant or whatever it might be. Check them out across the Locked On Podcast Network, wherever you get this podcast or on YouTube. Come on back tomorrow for our crossover Thursday podcast. It won't be Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings because he is overseas. He was at the London game, and now I think he's in Sweden. Good for him. I wish I was in Sweden right now as well. So it'll be friend of the show, Arif Hassan from Locked On Minnesota Sports and The Athletic. And now he's with Pro Football Network, but we love Arif, and we're going to have a fun time breaking down Bears-Vikings on tomorrow's podcast. So come back for that. Then on Friday, we will do a game plan for how the Chicago Bears can pull off the upset and beat the Minnesota Vikings on the road. Plenty of great Bears analysis coming your way. So I hope you'll keep coming back for more. Keep tuning in and keep getting that next opportunity for you to bear down.